is shifting in Philippine politics, and it starts with a woman who, not long ago, refused to say anything at all. Sara Duterte Carpio is the vice president of the Philippines. She is also, by most accounts, the frontrunner for the 2028 presidential race. And for years, she said almost nothing about China's growing aggression in the South China Sea. When Filipino fishermen were harassed by Chinese vessels in August 2024, she defended her silence. Foreign policy, she said, was not her role. That was then this week. She sent a video message to the Philippine Navy on its 128th anniversary. She praised naval personnel for their, and these are her words, steadfast commitment to defending our sovereignty and the integrity of our maritime territory. She told them they were the nation's first line of defense. She said protecting Philippine territory meant safeguarding the future of the next generation of Filipinos. She did not mention China by name, but everyone understood. Whoosh. Meant. Earlier this month, she told graduating cadets at the Philippine Military Academy to stand firm against all threats to our sovereignty, to not waver even in the face of the most difficult challenges. 2 speeches, same message. No name attached to the threat. That is not an accident. That is a strategy, and understanding it tells you almost everything about where Philippine politics is heading and what it means for the wider contest between Beijing and Washington in Southeast Asia. Let's go back to the beginning, because to understand Sara Duterte today, you have to understand her father. Rodrigo Duterte served as Philippine president from 2016 to 2022. He was many things: controversial, blunt, often shocking, but on China, he was consistent. He pivoted sharply toward Beijing and away from Washington. He downplayed territorial disputes. He welcomed Chinese investment. He described the United States as an unreliable partner and spoke warmly of President Xi Jinping. His Dao Nider inherited that political brand. She was seen as the continuity candidate, someone who would maintain her father's China-friendly posture if she reached Malacanang Palace. But the political ground has shifted beneath her feet. Public concern over China's behavior in the South China Sea has grown sharply. Filipino fishermen have been water cannoned. Philippines supply missions to disputed outposts have been blocked. Surveys show deep and widespread public mistrust of Beijing among ordinary Filipinos. The current president, Ferdinand Marcos Jr., has moved firmly in the other direction, strengthening defense ties with the United States and pushing back more assertively against Chinese incursions. That approach has broad public support. Sara Duterte is watching all of this, and she is recalibrating. Analysts who study Philippine politics say her recent statements are carefully designed. They are assertive enough to appeal to voters who want a leader willing to defend national sovereign, IGT, but they stop well short of directly naming China or condemning Beijing's actions. Edmund Teao is a professor at San Beda Graduate School of Law and president of a Manila-based think tank called Political Economic Elemental Researchers and Strategists. He says this is likely part of her preparation for 2028. He notes that the South China Sea issue has become, in his words, very important for voters. But he also observes that it is obvious she is trying as much as possible not to damage her relationship with China. Unless she begins addressing Chinese actions more directly, he says, her remarks will remain largely symbolic. That word, symbolic, is doing a lot of work here. Because symbolic is not nothing in politics. Symbolic statements move polling numbers, they signal direction without closing doors. They let a politician be many things to many people at once. Justin Keith Bacasal is a national security analyst and advisor at PSA Intelligence, a Manila-based strategic advisory firm. He puts it plainly, she has been criticized before for not condemning China's aggression enough. Given her foreign policy preferences, she will avoid negative messages. She will not denounce China directly. She will stick to positive affirmations, praising the Navy's defense of national sovereignty without naming who the Philippines is defending against. He calls it a good compromise. He uses a striking phrase, "You don't want to be the fish that goes against the current of the river." She does not want to be turned off by China, he says. So she will avoid confrontational rhetoric, even at some cost to her reputation on nationalistic issues. Now, widen the frame, because this is not just about one politician calculating her presidential odds. The South China Sea is one of the most strategically contested waterways on the planet. It carries an estimated 1/3 of global maritime trade. China claims most of it. The Philippines, Vietnam, Malaysia, Brunei, and Taiwan all have competing claims. In 2016, an international arbitral tribunal ruled decisively in favor of the Philippines, finding that China's sweeping claims had no basis in international law. China rejected that ruling. It has never accepted it. By June 2025, according to reports, Sara Duterte had moved to acknowledge the 2016 arbitral ruling in favor of the Philippines. But she insisted the territorial dispute did not make up the country's entire relationship with China. It was, she said, no reason to lean towards the U.S. That framing matters. It is a balancing act performed in public for multiple audiences at once: Filipino voters, Chinese officials, and American policymakers, all watching the same words and drawing their own conclusions. Chester Cabalza, president of the Manila-based think tank International Development and Security Cooperation, says she is playing both ends. She is being assertive enough to spell out early her foreign and security policies, but she also knows that A's international leadership is reshaping the geopolitical landscape. He says she may use her father's playbook in foreign affairs, but she will tweak it based on the current rivalry between the two superpowers to secure the Philippines' own national interest. Here is the human dimension of all this. Because behind every diplomatic calculation, there are people in boats. Filipino fishermen have worked the waters of the South China Sea for generations. The reefs and shoals they fish are under international law within the Philippines' exclusive economic zone. In recent years, reaching those fishing grounds has become dangerous. Chinese Coast Guard vessels have used water cannons. Laser devices have been trained on Filipino sailors. Supplies have been seized. These are not abstract geopolitical incidents. They are events that affect Filipino families directly, and they register in public opinion when politicians in Manila speak about sovereignty. Those fishermen are listening. When a vice president praises the Navy for defending maritime territory, those communities understand what is at stake. The South China Sea dispute is not a think tank abstraction in the Philippines. It is a lived reality. That reality is part of what makes Sara Duterte's calibrated silence, her praise without naming, her sovereignty language without accusation, so politically charged. She is speaking to voters who feel the stakes in their daily lives while trying not to alienate a neighbor that her father built bridges to. Not everyone is convinced the recalibration will hold, or that it is even genuine. Some analysts point out that her siblings have taken far more openly pro-China positions. Her brother Paulo Duterte has been among those more supportive of Beijing and critical of Washington. The Duterte family's China connections run deep, commercially, politically, and diplomatically. Cabalza notes that Sara Duterte's perceived softness toward China is rooted in her father's closeness with Beijing. He says Washington will need to, in his words, do a lot of catching up if she survives the impeachment trial. She is currently facing impeachment proceedings and emerges as the leading candidate for 2028. That is not a small conditional. The impeachment proceedings are ongoing. They could alter the political landscape entirely. But if she survives, and if the trajectory of public opinion in the Philippines continues in the direction it has been heading, the pressure on her to take a clearer stance on China will only intensify. A calibrated compromise that works in 2026 may not be enough in 2028. So where does this leave us? Sara Duterte is attempting something genuinely difficult. She is trying to appeal to a Filipino public that is increasingly alarmed by Chinese behavior in its own waters, while not so directly confronting Beijing that she closes off a relationship her family has spent years cultivating. Whether that balance is sustainable, whether voters will, I'll accept sovereignty rhetoric without sovereignty action, is the central question that will define her path to the presidency. Philippine voters are paying attention. Regional powers are watching. And Beijing, which has never responded well to being publicly named, is almost certainly noting the careful absence of its name in every speech she gives. The fish is swimming, the current is strong, and the river is getting wider. Here is the question worth sitting with. If Sara Duterte becomes president of the Philippines in 2028, would you expect her to stand firmer against China than her father did? Or is this sovereignty language simply the price of a ticket, something to be walked back once she reaches Malacanang? Leave your answer in the comments. We read them. And we'll be following this story closely as the 2028 race begins to take shape.